Welcome to Pratidwani, where we try to humanize science. I'm your host, GV Pawan Kumar. It is my delight and pleasure to introduce you to the guest on this particular episode, Anindita Bhadra. Anindita is a associate professor at the Indian Institute of Science Education and Research, Kolkata, and she's doing some very fascinating work on ecology. And her lab is actually called as Dog Lab. It is a very fascinating kind of a research area, and she has also been very active, a researcher not only in bringing out the technical aspects of her work, but also amalgamating that into the social life of animals, and really throwing light on various interesting things. She is, by the way, an outstanding artist. She is also an actress, and she has been actually very actively involved in theater. With this brief introduction and many many other things to unveil, I welcome Anindita on Pratidwani.
Thank you, Pawan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, Anindita, I'm just curious to know, how did you actually really get interested in so many interesting things, including your own research is very fascinating, but also that all-round development of a person being not only interested in science but also in art. It probably has a connection to your origins. So please let us know, how did you get interested in all these things?
Yeah, so I grew up in Kolkata, and Kolkata is a very culturally active city. So, uh, from my childhood, I've been learning Kathak dance. My mother is very interested in theater and dance and music. So she was very keen to get me to learn the arts. And in school, we had a very, very active culture of, inter-house competitions every week, in the, end of the week, Fridays. And then we used to go for fests as we grew up, and all kinds of activities happened in our school. I went to GD Birla, and there, often our parents would say that you people are always singing and dancing and debating and doing whatnot, and when do you study? So I grew up in that environment. And also, in Bengal, there is this concept of a neighborhood culture
Hmm.
where we have the Durga Puja, and then you have some cultural activities for 5 days. And I was also very much involved in that. In fact, in high school, I was the one organizing everything.
Hmm.
So that was there all through. So, dance and theater were two things that I was doing actively. I could never sing. So that was out of the question. And that kind of stayed with me even through college. And then when I went to IISER for my PhD, there too, I got involved in all kinds of activities. Then the Students' Council, Voices newsletter of students. So it's kind of been there, and I've grown up in that ambience. So the cultural part of that, and talking about the science, in fact, I never thought that I'll be a scientist. I always wanted
Hmm.
to be a teacher since I was 5 years old. My you know dream was that I will be a teacher, and I was the only kid in the house for several years. And my pastime was playing teacher and teaching all the furniture in the rooms. So, because there was nobody to play with most of the time. But my parents wanted me to be a doctor. And thankfully, I did not clear the joint entrance exam for medicine. At that point of time, there were like few hundred seats. And I kind of said, okay, fine, let's go do something else. And I joined the zoology program, fell in love with the subject. Next year, my mother coaxed me to again, and I was very scared that I will actually clear it because all the questions seemed very easy now. And I actually submitted a paper which was almost blank with some doodles because I did not want to clear the joint entrance. And that's how I got into science. So
Wonderful,
PhD
wonderful.
was something which kind of came later.
Came later. Yeah, we will come to that particular point. One of the things I'm kind of curious is, like, how do you really, um, get interested in the topics what you are interested in? Because some of the things what you have worked on, of course, it also involves natural history. There's also a very beautiful description on your webpage how you really got it, enthused about a field trip what you had during your the college days, etc. I'm going to anyway link that in the show notes. But I just want to get your kind of view on the development stage of any child, where a student or any child is getting exposed to some new concepts in science, especially at the level of school, etc. How did you actually get enthused about it? Because there are many things. Kolkata also, of course, is also very well known for physical and chemical sciences, etc. I just want to know, how did you make that choice? What was the environment in your home? What was the kind of ecosystem you had?
So, I have always been fascinated by animals.
Mm,
I would interact with all the dogs in the neighborhood and
mm,
feed them biscuits and stuff like that. So, and in my house, there was always some stray cat hanging around, and my grandfather would every day after lunch feed the dogs and the cats. So, I have grown up seeing that. And I generally liked animals, and often my grandfather and I would watch these. Those days we didn't have 24/7 TV, so these small TV programs on animals that would come. There was one program which was Attenborough's Life on Earth. They
mm,
used to show small episodes of it. So my grandfather and I would, wait for that session because we really loved watching these. So that was one thing. And then in school, I generally liked biology.
mm,
So, actually in school science, a lot of it is biology.
mm,
And I think, when you're a kid and some teacher teaches in a different way, you get fascinated by that. So I remember there was our science teacher. She brought this, she made us germinate gram seeds when we were in class 3, and then she asked us to bring these to class, and then she showed that not all the seeds have germinated, and then what is going to be the root and what is going to be the shoot, and then she dissected a seed and showed us what was inside. And that was so fascinating. Something that I eat every day and something that's this dry thing, that is actually something that holds life. So to a kid who's 8 years, 9 years old, that is a really fascinating experience. So these small things in school that I think kind of kept my interest in biology. Um, Also, I have an aunt who was a biology school teacher, and I would often visit her home, and she would be teaching her students, and I would just sit there and listen, not understanding most of it, but I would be really fascinated by all the diagrams she made. She was also a very good artist, so she would really draw these beautiful images, and she was like, okay, this is the heart and this is the kidney, and I was like, oh my god, these things are inside my body. So that's how I think my love for biology grew.
biology.
And how I picked up animal behavior is a different story, because when we were in college, um, Professor Shilanjan Bhattacharya, he
Mm,
just
mm,
joined then. He had done his PhD in IISER with Professor Madhav Garkal.
mm,
And he told us this fantastic stories about his field trips, about the
mm,
Western Ghats. And then he took us on a field trip
mm,
to the Western Ghats in our second year of BSc. And on the way, we stopped by at CES for a day. There, we had lab visits, typical
mm.
visits to a department, and Professor Gadakar spoke to us. He spoke
Nice.
to us about social insects,
Mm,
and we visited her lab. In fact, it is a very interesting coincidence
mm,
that I still remember a student took us around and showed us the vespiary where all the wasps were kept. And I remembered this particular student because she showed us, and with a lot of patience, she explained everything. She was a junior student at that time. When I joined the same lab for my PhD, she was the senior most student. And I
wow.
told her, you had showed us around the lab. I remember, you don't remember, because obviously we get so many
Yeah,
students.
yeah.
And now she's my colleague in IISER Kolkata. So,
Wow, what a wonderful thing. What a wonderful thing.
so yeah.
Sumana.
It's a great story. So, and I came back and I said, I want to go back there and I want to do my PhD with social insects with Professor Gadakar. I was so fascinated. So
This
that
is
was where, yeah, animal behavior love started.
no, wonderful, wonderful. It's so heartening to actually listen to this human stories, because that is the whole point about the humanizing science. What we tend to actually aim towards in this podcast. One of the things, Anita, I would just want to ask you a little bit more in detail is the influence of your own parents. What was it at home? Do you also, if you can let us know if you have a, sibling who also grew up with you, because these are all formative years. They surely have very important foundational kind of implication on a researcher. Could you let us know how was it growing up at home?
So I grew up in a joint family. So, and I was actually much more associated with my grandparents than my parents, because my mother was this eldest lady in the house after my grandmother, and she was always busy with chores, and she had her own activities, a lot of things. And my father was always in office, and frankly, I was very scared of him. He was this, super personality that everybody in the family was afraid of. Very tall guy with a very deep voice, and he had this angry young man image in the family. So I was very scared of him, and I stayed away from him as much as possible. And but one thing I would always say, that my parents always let me follow whatever I wanted to do. My father just said, I want you to stand on your own feet. I want you to have a career. I want you to, be somebody. That was the only thing he expected of us. And I have a sister. She's much younger than me, 8 years younger to me. So she, when she was born, I felt like I have been presented with a live doll, and I still treat her like a baby at times. So she, and then there were my cousin brothers who were in this house. So I was like this big sister with 3 kids to look after, and I felt very grown up all the time. So in fact, it was very interesting. Now when I look at my kids and think back to my days, I remember when I was 12 years old, my family members almost treated me like an adult at times, saying, okay, do you think we should do this? Do you think we should not do this, kind of stuff? So people paid attention to things I said because they thought I was very matured. So I don't know how matured I was, but I was always, being this responsible younger sibling, taking care of the kids. And so, especially when in the summer, my other uncle and aunt came visiting, they had 2 kids. So my summers were full of 5 kids who were like 8 years, 9 years, 10 years younger than me. And so there's huge age gap. And I was the one taking care of, I would sit down with one big plate of food and I'll feed all 5 of them together, telling them stories. I love to hear stories from my grandfather, and then I would tell them these stories to keep them quiet. So, I would make them all sit down in the evening, give them maths to do. So that was my role. So I was this permanent teacher come elder sister. And I am the eldest in the whole family. So, that has been always there. And I think another big influence in my life has been my grandmother and my grandfather. My grandmother was a stickler for discipline and cleanliness and neatness. So, things should be in their proper place. And my grandfather had this fascinating, life from in the villages, growing up in the villages, coming to Kolkata, and he was a great storyteller. So I think I picked up some of his storytelling skills, which I can use in my class now. Absolutely. So that is that is kind of, and then there were uncles, and then they got married, so there were aunts. So it was a big family, and I think one big thing in the family was, in the night we would all sit around the dining table, and I would tell them about my day in school, and there would be a lot of discussion, and my uncles would tell about some anecdote that happened in work today. So that's the kind of environment in which I grew up, where it was very important that you study and you do well. But it was also very important that you do other things. You don't do just studies. You need to go out and play every day, and go to your dance, you go to your art class, and engage in other things. And we always had a lot of relatives visiting because of my grandparents. They were very connected. My mother was very connected to the extended family. So every few weeks we had guests, every few weeks we had, aunts and cousins. So I kind of grew up in this environment where if you needed to study, you need to find a quiet corner, go to your room, shut the door for some time and study. Otherwise, people are going to always stop you from studying. And that's how it was like. And I guess all these influence somehow the way you start thinking and relate to people, talk to people, because I have always found that I find it very easy to talk to people. I don't have to think that, okay, I'm going to a new place, how do I mingle? Because I have mingled all my life. So it has been very easy.
Wonderful, wonderful. Probably these are all things which also would have influenced you to take up behavioral ecology, because it is one thing to connect to yourself in a way as a scholar, but it is another thing and a very challenging thing for somebody to really study behavior, because behavior has its own complexities. It's very easy for like physicists like me to do a reductionist way of thinking and take everything to a kind of an isolated situation. Behavior is totally at the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this I'm always curious to know, because especially I've also spoken to people like Avitab Joshi, Sutir, and you're also in that kind of fantastic lineage of evolutionary biologists from India who have done some very interesting things. So they all are people who have very kind of slightly different viewpoint of the world, more broader, and in my opinion also in a way a better view of the world, because there is also a nuanced way of looking at the world. Because many a times people who actually are a little cocooned into specific questions, which become slightly more isolated from human beings, tend to look at the world differently. I'm no way actually telling that they don't have the viewpoint or something like that, but I'm always curious because this also has connection to the upbringing. And I also see from your research that you work on questions related to parental care in dogs, and these are all very important questions, because they have the answers or even potential clues to these questions has a greater lesson beyond just the community of dogs. There is a
Yes, yes.
lesson for human beings also. I'm just curious to know how these questions evolve. Are these questions also somehow connected to your upbringing? Because there is a very fascinating kind of connection probably there. I'm just trying to figure it out. Yeah.
Okay, so one thing is that because of my PhD training, where I worked on social wasps, I like to say I worked on wasp politics.
Mm,
So there, the understanding a society was very fascinating.
mm,
And
mm,
then dogs live in groups. So my first level of curiosity was, what kind of groups are these? Are these loose groups, family groups? What kind of bondings do they have? Because when I looked at the existing literature, uh, which is, of course, again from the global north, the idea was that, okay, these are pets, these can live alone and they consider humans as their families. But then when they become stray or something, then, one or two or three dogs randomly will come together and become a group. So groups are not really social units, but these are like random individuals coming together. So there were a couple of papers that actually said this. But growing up, again, I had seen that there are mother dogs, and then there are the pups, and then they seem to stay on together and make one family. So to me, it was not convincing enough that these are just loose groups. So that was like one of the first things we started looking at when we started taking behavioral data. One of the first questions we were addressing was in terms of maternal care, the extent of
mm,
maternal care,
mm.
and then how long they stay back and how long the mother cares. And that is how we found that they actually live in joint families. And I was so fascinated because this reminded me of my own childhood days, because there would be grandmothers, there would be all kinds of dynamics between uncles and aunts and siblings and the mother. Some would stay on, some would leave, some would show care to the pups, some would not. So it was extremely fascinating to find this, because nobody had even thought about this. People just thought that dogs are dogs and they belong to people's homes. And I think that is where I would like to always insist, and in our work, we are trying to understand their social dynamics more and more, because we really need to know how much damage we are doing to them when we just pick up a dog and take it home. Because we think that they're happy and we are giving them a bed to sleep on and a bowl to eat from, but are they really happy? Are they missing their families? We don't know. And not that my research tells me whether they're missing their families, but I can definitely shed light on what their real social life is like. So I think being in a family so big and around uncles and aunts and grandparents all the time had somehow influenced this curiosity about the families. But also, I think my PhD training of looking into social lives of animals was the more scientific reason for starting to look at the social lives of dogs.
Interesting. So, which also means that the questions what you were motivated had anchors not only in your own environment, but also the kind of things what you learned going forward and the kind of exposure you got. You also learned very interesting things about wasp, which we're going to come to in a few minutes. So tell me about the transition from school to college. Like, were you already kind of thinking about becoming a biologist, or was it still early days, or nothing
No.
decided?
So as I said, initially it was my family thinking that I should be a doctor. And then I did not get through the joint, so I applied to colleges and I went into zoology, because for me then, I definitely wanted to study biology. My father wanted me to do English and try for the administrative services, but I said no, I want to do biology, and that is it. So that's how I ended up doing zoology, and that was a conscious transition, that I definitely want to do biology. That was definitely conscious. And then you do a BSc in zoology, you go on to do MSc in zoology. That was kind of more routine. But already in my BSc days, I had made up my mind that I want to do animal behavior ecology. So that is something that was there in the back of my mind all the time. So that transition was motivated.
That is a very crucial thing. In fact, I have to also mention that a lot of students who have this kind of inclination towards being in outdoors and nature, this is one of the outstanding research areas to get in. Right?
Yes, absolutely.
Could you please tell us what is the kind of training you had? Were you also kind of going around your locality and other places during your formative years? Was that also a part of
in my
your
formative years, I was playing with boys who were junior to me, because the boys who were of my age would not play with me because I was a girl. And so there was this gang of 4 or 5 boys who called me Didi and who were my kind of gang. And we had this funny game of hide and seek where nobody hit. You just, whoever was the one to be finding the people was doomed for that evening, because everybody just, went into this garden, that backyard, and there was one person on the lookout, and you saw this guy coming, you ran and went somewhere else. So it was basically, running around the entire neighborhood, getting as messy as possible. So we would jump over walls, hide behind garbage dumps and things like this. So when we came back home, the first thing was go to the bathroom and have a bath before you are, eligible for talking to somebody. And I was very much active, as I said, in the neighborhood and in school, doing a lot of, I was not a very sports-oriented person, but I was doing a lot of dance and theater. In our school, I think one of the brilliant things that our school did was we had this, when we were growing up, there was this science fair which happened at the BITM, Birla Industrial and Technological Museum. So they would invite a lot of schools, middle school students, and we had to go and put up stalls and have posters and models and stuff like that. So during those years, 6 to 8, every year we would go for this, and we had to talk to people, explain things, make models. So I was always doing a lot of things with my hands, and I liked doing craft. So even when it came to making models, I would be the one who would be doing the dirty work with all the glue and the paper and stuff like that. So that is the kind of way I have grown up. And I have my maternal grandparents' house. I would go once a year, and my grandfather was an avid gardener. He had a fantastic garden, so I would spend hours with him digging and watering, and finding out why you're doing this, why you're doing that, and I would pester him with questions. After a point, he would tell me, "Okay, fine, I have had enough of you. Go inside and do something else." So I guess that way I've been exposed to the outdoors in a different kind of way, not really playing football or cricket, but doing other things. And my father would often take us for these trips. So we have, Bengalis have this travel bug. So we have traveled to Himachal and Andamans and Rajasthan. So traveling has been there. And whenever we travel, were exposed to a lot of new ideas, cultures, sites. And I always was very fascinated by the mountains. The Himalayas were like absolutely wonderful to me. We Thankfully, now we are a family where everybody is obsessed with the Himalayas. So every vacation we just go either to the northeast or somewhere else in the Himalayas. But that's been there. So I guess I have always been a bit of a nature lover. So that has also helped to increase the curiosity about nature.
Wonderful, wonderful. So in that sense, growing up already is laying a very good foundation for you to explore things. And given that you already have this kind of exposure to botany, probably also zoology to a large extent, because as per your kind of career, you would have also studied other subjects, because behavior is also not only about just natural science. There is an also human element which is necessary for you to understand. Was that something part of your education?
No.
No.
Actually, during my education, behavior was a very tiny part, only the BSc and MSc, because of the syllabus. So actually, the most of the learning in ecology, behavior, even evolution that I have done is what we have imbibed during my CES days, because not just the courses, but also my regular lab exposure, plus a lot of beautiful talks which used to happen in CES all the time. And a fantastic library where I could spend hours reading things. So all of that, and of course, Professor Gadakar, and a lot of discussions with him. So all of that has influenced the way I have evolved. And I think my evolution into a scientist has really happened in IISER. That is something that I'm very sure about. So I was any other student, maybe a good student, maybe interested in many things in my BSc and MSc, but me becoming a scientist really happened, and that journey was really in IISER. And not just during the science, but also the other exposures. Because Professor Gadakar started the center called Center for Contemporary Studies, where he would get a lot of fantastic people, and we had great interactions with them. So people in economics, politics, literature, arts, law. So all kinds of fields, and all over the world and all over the country. That has also shaped a lot of ways in which I now think. I realize that often when I talk to my students, or I take a class, or where I'm talking in some other forum where we are discussing, say, policy or something. Then I realize how much these talks during those years have, and these interactions have influenced my thinking.
Yeah, that's actually very, very critical. What point you're mentioning is that exposure to kind of liberal education is so critical. In fact, without that, sometimes, and I assume you would surely would have experienced this, is that you would not be also a good science student without having this kind of an exposure, because that kind of worldview is very critical. In fact, that's important. So tell me about the transition from your Kolkata days to Bangalore. How did that happen, and what motivated you to go to IISc? and give us a gist of, of course, Professor Gadakar's lab is renowned across the world. He's also a great speaker, a great mentor, great writer, and there are so many things for us to really, extract and understand, and also learn from a lot of things what he has done. And you have had, kind of direct interaction with him for a longer period of time. So give us a gist, first and foremost, your entry into IISc. Second is your experience of working with Professor Gadakar's lab.
Yeah, so as I said, with that field trip happened in our
Mm.
second year of BSc, and he gave a fantastic, the kind of talks that he gives, and you're hearing somebody for the first time. That was the first scientific lecture we are hearing outside of college, and that happens to be Professor Gadakar. Obviously, everybody is bold, and I was also very impressed because he would be so open to all kinds of silly questions I asked. In fact, I happened to be asking a lot of questions, and he answered each and every one of them. So that was the first motivation to go back to IISc. And actually, the first glimpse of IISc, I think I fell in love. It was raining when we came in. We were waiting at the main gate, somebody to come and collect us from there, and it was just an amazing place to be. So who would not want to go back there? So that was
you were joining as I PhD, integrated
no, I
PhD,
joined
or
later as a PhD. I
PhD
did my
PhD.
master's in Calcutta University,
Okay,
and then
okay.
I joined as a PhD. So that kind of motivated me to apply, and thankfully I cleared the entrance exam. Those days we had the IISc entrance.
Yes, you're right.
So we cleared the entrance exam and went back for the interviews, and that is a different story. But that was the first step, getting into IISc. And of course, I remember during the interview, Professor Gadakar was not there that year, and they asked us to give names in order of preference of the faculty you would like to join in a sealed envelope. And I had given one, Professor Gadakar, two XYZ, three XYZ. So I really didn't care which other lab they put me in, because I was sure if I don't get Professor Gadakar's lab, I'm not coming. So
okay.
he later told me that everybody found it very funny that you've given your option like this, making it very obvious which lab you want to go to. So, and he was there, but I was not even there during the interview. So later he was asking me, and I said, yeah, but that didn't matter. I had read survival strategies. I had heard you talk, and I was fascinated, and I wanted to come here. And then he looks at me and said, yeah, that's why you are looking so familiar. You were that girl who kept on asking questions among Shilanjan students.
Nice,
so
nice.
that was my first interaction with him. So that's how I got in and started studying wasps.
Nice. So this particular question of wasp, because they also have fascinating kind of ecosystem, the problems related to that whole sociological aspects also related to them. And there is also, of course, interaction with the external environment, and also the interaction among themselves. And you studied some. I think you also call the PhD thesis a queen of something like that, right? There is something related to the.
So they have a queen. These colonies, they have a queen, and then the rest of them are workers. But in this species, the queen, unlike in honeybees, for example, the queen is much bigger. And you can see and know that this is the queen. In these wasps, the queen and the workers look the same. So you have to recognize her by seeing her laying eggs. So behaviorally, she's a queen. And when I joined, Sumana was just finishing, and her thesis showed that if you remove the queen, one worker takes over very soon as what we call the potential queen. And within a week or so, she starts laying eggs. But before that, when she takes over, she is very aggressive. And she goes around literally beating up everyone in the colony. But then if you put the queen back, this potential queen again quietens down and becomes a normal worker. And Sumana had done a lot of different kinds of experiments, but she showed that either by behavior or by morphology, in the presence of the queen, you cannot identify the potential queen. So I took up from there, And I started asking, do the wasps know who the new queen will be? We don't, but among them, is there a hierarchy? And I did a set of experiments in which we actually showed that yes, the wasps know who the heir designate is, and the heir designate also knows that she is the heir designate. So, but this was a very tedious experiment, but we finally ended up doing it. And the other aspect of the thesis that I was working on was to understand how the queen signals that I'm here. And we showed for the first time that she really uses a chemical signature, which she applies on the nest surface. So as she walks, she puts this chemical trail, and others walking on the nest can sense her presence by sensing her chemical on the nest. And if you remove her, then within half an hour, this chemical trail is gone. And the potential queen, actually within 15 minutes, the potential queen becomes the potential queen and goes around beating everyone. But we proved that if you take the queen's glandular extract and put it on the nest, then the potential queen quietens down, which means that this is really the proof that the queen is using this signature. So my thesis was, that's why I said, was politics. So I call it the story of power. And we were really looking at, what is the queen's signature and how does she maintain her power without aggression, and also the kind of succession, whether it is silent, whether it is understood by the cult, whether it is understood by the individuals would be the queen, and we showed that yes, they do.
Wonderful. It's so fascinating. And also something so what was it kind of working there in the lab, because IISc also has a beautiful ecosystem, not only in terms of, let's say, the research atmosphere, but also beyond that.
Yes.
So in that way, how was it like? The natural environment in IISc is also very good, and so you probably also explored some things.
Yes. We used to have walks into the Jubilee Garden and listen to the crickets and things like that. And when I see again, one of the things that I love doing on Sunday mornings was just cycling on the IISc campus. That was such a great thing to do, and took away any stress that you had if you just cycle down those. So much greenery and such a beautiful campus, right? A lot of it is gone now, but it used to be much greener when we were there. In IISc, I was, I remember when I finally presented my thesis colloquium, some of the students said, "Oh, you have done so much work. When were you working?" Because people could see me in theater, people could see me doing we brought out this newsletter called Voices from the Students' Council. So I was one of the editors. I was doing student support network. I was doing protest campaigns for fee hike. So I was doing I was in the fest committee. So everything that was there to be done by students, I was just support system there was my supervisor. So I would come, something would happen, and excitedly I would go. And then he would listen to me patiently, ask me questions, give suggestions. So it was like I had a very, very active social, cultural, political life on the campus of IISc. And after that, I also had a very active family life because I got married in my third year. I eventually campus, and then I had my son. Did my thesis on his first birthday. So
wow.
He had a very active life all through.
Yeah, I should mention Anindita is married to Ayan Banerjee, who is an outstanding, physicist. I very soon will also have him on Pratidwani at some point of time. So, Anindita, please tell us a little bit about the kind of friendship you developed in IISc, because I know you had a very active life also beyond science. I know you were very active in theater too, because Ayan, who is also very active into theater, how did that develop? That is a fascinating thing about both of you. I would want to get your viewpoint of how did you really develop that interest in theater?
I said I was always interested in theater. I
Hmm.
grew up doing theater in my neighborhood and my school. So when I went to ISO, IISc has this cultural community of Bengalis called, they do this Saraswati Puja every year.
Hmm.
And they would write down, all the freshers welcome of the Bengalis. They would ask, okay, what do you do? What are your hobbies? And I said theater, dance. So then they approached me, Bengali theater is happening. And it's very rare that a girl says I do theater. So they find it always difficult to find a girl who's Bengali who do theater. So the seniors were very happy and they asked me, I said, yeah, of course I'll do. I'm missing theater already after coming here. And I met Arun doing theater because he was already involved with this for many years. So he was the veteran and I was the newcomer. And he was mentoring me. So that's how we met. And then we discovered other commonalities, starting from both of us hating raw onion. So so people find it very funny when both of us say, we've gone for dinner, no raw onion for us. And we're like, how come both of you don't like it? So yeah, we actually realized that we like a lot of things. And in IISc, this was a very big joke. CES girls marry physics boys. When people got to know about us, that they were like, okay, you are the fourth CES physics couple. So it's really, in fact, and this is an interesting tidbit. In IISER Kolkata, we have 3 CES physics couples.
Wow.
So
yourself
all the
and,
physicists knew each other from physics. Me and Ayan, Sumana and Dibendu, and Anuradha and Siddhartha. So Siddharth,
okay.
Dibendu and Ayan were all contemporary.
Yes. So I did not know Siddharth's thing actually. I knew other two, of course. Yeah.
So that just shows you the high probability of a physicist marrying an ecologist.
Fascinating.
So that's how theatre went.
Nice.
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
Yeah. So I just want to also know a little bit more about the kind of plans you were having for your career, because you now have exposure to this wonderful research problem on Wasp, and also you are broadening your horizon, so to speak, because you're also getting interested in theater and other things. Because I think if you really wanted to take up that as a full career, you would have probably even done very good there too. But what were the choices? What were the choices in your mind? Like, what were those things which you were thinking about, like in terms of career choices? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So that was actually a big decision-making phase in our lives. So Arnold was senior to me, and he finished his PhD soon after we got married. And he took a conscious decision not to go for a postdoc, though he had a couple. Stay on in GE at least until I finished my PhD. So he took up the GE offer, and we continued to stay together. And so he was doing research in GE. And then when I was finishing, we already had Ujjan. And then it was a bigger thing that, if now we have to find a postdoc, then both of us have to move somewhere. And I was applying to places, and I was very conscious that I did not want to do social insect behavior any longer. I wanted to do other things. And that is where I realized, and I was interested in that time, my first preference was infant cognition. And when I was writing to a few people, they were saying, but you don't have a psychology background, so infant cognition is not going to work for you. Then I had a discussion with Professor Gadakar one day, and he said, why don't you think about applying to the two IISERs, because they are taking in fresh PhDs as IISER fellows, and I think that is very lucrative because you like teaching. There you will get to teach. And that's when we started thinking very seriously. And both of us applied together to IISER Kolkata. And it just cracked. So that time I had to decide what I will do if I get a job. And I remember I wrote 3 mini proposals, one on infants, one on dogs, and the third on crows. And I gave it to Professor Gadakar to say, give me feedback. And he then we had a long discussion, and he's like, again, infants, you will not get permission. So don't consider it right now. So think about the crows and the dogs. And I said, okay, see, my first love would be the dogs, but I'm also very fascinated by crows. I find them, very, very interesting animals. And then we were like, okay, students might be more interested in dogs than in crows, so I'll find it easier to work on dogs. Crows are more difficult to catch and label, and but without labeling, we can work on dogs. So we were really going, point by point, and what is feasible, what is more feasible, what is less feasible, and that time Suhail Qadar had joined NCBS, and RG said, well, Suhail is also working on crows, so better not step on his toes. So I was like, okay, fine. Anyway, my first preference was dogs, so let's just stick to it. And that's where I actually started doing some, natural history data collection on ISC campus, because I had never worked on a mammalian system, right? So even to create a research proposal, I needed to have some basic understanding. So what we call this is ad libitum observations in ethology, where, you do qualitative observations, just like taking natural history notes. And I started doing this, and I would often go and have discussions with Professor Gadakar, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm thinking of. And he would ask questions. And that is how I developed my first proposal. But I think what is interesting is the conversation we had, where he asked me, why not social insects? And I told him, see, I want to work in India. I want to stay in India. I will have to work with some other species. I don't want to work on ants and not bees. Bees are like done and dusted. So wasps. Now in wasps, if I start studying a new species, I will have to start from where you had started, because you have done it all so well. It will have to start from there because nothing is known. But finally, I will be basically repeating things that you have done in one species to do it with another, because your protocols, your methods, your questions have been so nicely done that there's no point reinventing the wheel and doing something more lousy. So then everybody will say, okay, Gadakar's student is doing Gadakar's kind of work, and I will remain Gadakar's student all my life. Thing is, I love being your student, but I also want my own identity. So I want to do something drastically different. I often say this to people, that most supervisors would stop talking to that student forever after that. And that is where RG is different. He actually stood up, shook hands with me, and said, you have given me true academic fitness. This is what a supervisor would love, that the student actually does something new and starts a new field of research. And, that is where he is so different from everyone else, and he's so special. And even till date, I get stuck somewhere. He's the person I call up. So he's remained my mentor lifelong.
Wonderful. What a story. What a story. In fact, there is a very, very important lesson for everybody who would want to actually go into an independent career, not just in science. There is a very valuable lesson in this particular thing. It also tells Anindita that there should be a level of confidence. There should be also a level of conviction, because it's a very easy thing to just go and start something which you already have been doing for a long time, because the resistance, and also in terms of the starting point, is very well defined then, because then at least you have some groundwork already to work with and things like that. And I should really appreciate that you took that very bold move. I assume you would have also been supported by your family and others around you.
Oh yeah, my family has been really supportive, especially Ayon. I mean, he's been the biggest pillar of support for me.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. It's so heartening to actually know this, because generally that is something which is not appreciated, and it is an important lesson for everybody to note that one would actually have a very good career if you also are independently venturing into things which you feel very interested about. This is something which doesn't happen often, because a lot of people get caught in that cycle of getting into the larger stream of consciousness, where everything is already set and you want to go
It's,
forward.
easier
Yeah.
when you are doing something you already know,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So you already know this, you're in this comfort zone, and doing it, it's easier to publish, there's less pressure. For me, it was a big struggle initially, because I was not confident of publishing anything and everything, right? So I needed solid data before I published anything. And I had feedback from people here in the administration who said, I was even told, fine, when your dogs are sleeping, why don't you do something else and publish a paper? So and I said, that's not how you publish papers in behavior. You need time. But most people don't understand that.
Yeah,
Where's
yeah.
your paper? It's already your third year. Why don't you have a paper yet? But but if you stick on and if you put your foot down and say that I'll do it my way, eventually it works out.
Yeah, yeah. Wonderful, wonderful. This is an important and very critical kind of viewpoint what you mentioned. So we're going to talk a little bit about your own laboratory now, because you have been also mentor to so many nice students and also wonderful research projects. You also, been one of the important persons who established this young academia, which plays a very critical role in also, bringing up people who are starting their careers and other things. You have played multiple roles in various different kind of directions, and in that way, anybody who is wanting to have an academic career would want your kind of contribution to the institution, being active not only in terms of research, teaching, mentoring. This is actually a kind of what should I say, an administrator's dream, because people like that are, irreplaceable, irreplaceable in terms of an academic system. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? How did you go about establishing your own research group, and also, starting all these ventures? And I should tell the listeners and the viewers that Anindita is one of the few people who was also featured on World Economic Forum. If you go on their webpage, her name actually is still there. It's very rare to have a scientist who has been also mentioned there. So yeah, Anindita, please tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so the lab has been, the typical way that you take in PhD students and the lab grows. And because of I work on dogs, there are always a lot of young BSc, MSc students who want to come and work for 2 months, generally learn because they like dogs. And they think, okay, I'll get some experience. And often what has happened is somebody has come in as an intern, continued to do a master's project, and has continued as a PhD student, because once they come, they don't want to leave. That is, I think, one thing I'm very proud of, that our lab, not just mine, this entire ecology behavior group, the three of us share together. It's like one family. And because, all three of us have known each other, Anuradha, Sumana, and me, from our PhD days, it's really like, three friends together, and our students are all friends together. We call ourselves the behavior ecology group. We do everything together, from organizing conferences to going out for special dinners and things like that. So it's a very happy environment that we have in these three labs. In fact, Sumana and I share a lab. We did not have a wall between our labs when we moved in here. So our students all sit together. So it's like an extended kind of offshoot of our G's lab, with his grand offspring as the students that we have. So the growing of the lab has been mostly because a lot of people are interested in dogs, and then they come in and they like the work and they stay. The other things that I have done, so I have always been interested in teaching. So teaching has, as I said, has been my first love, which is what brought me into research, not the other way around. So from the very beginning, I have been teaching extensively in IISER. And there have been many things in which I have been very vocal. That has been my habit since my PhD days, that, I think some injustice is happening. I have to stand up and speak against it, or I think I can contribute somewhere. I'll have to go and do something about it. And that is how I have been in discussions, especially, in the India Bioscience Young Investigators meeting. That was a place where I build a new network of people, where I got to, discuss and give inputs into different topics which are concerns for young scientists. And I was in this meeting where I was selected to represent India. It was a meeting of TWAS in Bangladesh. And they had, sent one young scientist from each country.
Yes.
So there I met someone who came and spoke to me about the Global Young Academy. And he was a member of the Global Young Academy, and he was saying, why don't you apply? It's a fantastic thing. And then I came back and I happened to meet RG once, and I told him, if there's a Global Young Academy, why don't we have an Indian Young Academy? And we had a long discussion, and he said, well, there have been proposals, but nothing has gone through. Senior people don't want young people to have more power in their hands. So that is the attitude of, the very feudal attitude that we have in India. And then I said, no, I think we should start an academy. So then 2 years after this, he became INSA president. And I called him up and I said, now you have the power to make a young academy, make it. He actually created
yeah, please tell us on the same lines. So
Professor Gadakar created this 3-member committee to come up with a proposal. And we had Rajesh Gopakumar as the committee chair, and then me and Ranjani. You might know her. So the three of us came up with a proposal, and this Rajesh presented in the INSA Council, and then, INIAS was officially formed in this 2015 December meeting in Goa. So then INIAS, it was formed, but it didn't have any members, right? So then INSA Council decided that they will send out a call to the INSA young scientist recipients who are below 40, and they selected 20 founding members from these applications which came in. And literally, we had these 20 people who did not know each other from different institutes in the country. We just receive an email saying, okay, fine, you are the founding members of INIAS. And then, you are given your academy, do whatever you want to do with it. So that is how we started. And then I was the only one of those 20 people who knew what was happening. So I kind of wrote to everyone saying, okay, this is the history, and now we have this, let us meet and let us, take things forward. So we had a meeting in INSA, we created the executive committee, the core committee, we call it. And then from there, we started kind of moving on with 20 people. Now INIAS has 100 plus members, and activities happening every week all over the country. So in fact, we have the mid-year meeting happening in IISER Kolkata next week. So wonderful. We are in our 10th year, and I always say this is my third baby.
Wonderful. That's
it has been a nice experience. But I think also with INIAS, and then next year I became member of GYA, and eventually I finished my term as one of the co-chairs. And there, the GYA actually gave me this very global outlook and the opportunity to interact with a lot of people who are in science policy, administration, science diplomacy. And there, my interest in this actually evolved. I'm now much more engaged in these things than before. That's been a very interesting experience, because it gives you a very, very different view of how you do your science.
Wonderful. Actually, that's an important point, what you mentioned, because, one of the complaints I always have is that the engagement of scientists with the general public, even in the public policy forum, is very minimal. because a lot of input which goes into those policy making many a times is not coming from people who have very high stakes, in my opinion, at least many a
Absolutely.
times.
Absolutely.
Therefore, the input also, people actually are receptive, just that sometimes scientists are not forthcoming, and one needs to
Yes.
actually, one needs to have
In
something,
fact,
somebody like you. Yeah,
I
yeah.
keep telling my students, we do our research with public money. It
Mm,
is our responsibility to take the findings from these research out to the public. And that's why, outreach is something that I
yeah,
enforce on my students, and eventually they also take it up. So,
yeah.
one thing I can tell you is that outreach is something that all our students are very engaged in.
Engaged.
And this is something I still think we don't do enough of,
I
because
agree.
we are scientists somehow sit in this ivory tower and
Whatever.
they think they're doing some great science, and they don't consider it good enough to talk to people
Mm,
about their research, because you will not understand.
mm,
But then, for me, if you're a scientist and if you cannot explain your scientist to your grandmother, then you are not a scientist.
mm,
you
mm.
know Come out with what you are doing in layman's terms, at
Yeah,
a level where everyone can understand.
I understand.
Of course, I don't expect you to explain your quantum mechanics equations to your grandmother, but the concept
Concept. Yeah,
and why
yeah.
you are doing it, that should be explainable to everyone. Otherwise, you have no right to ask for public money to do science.
Absolutely right. Absolutely. I concur with what you're mentioning. In fact, there is also an internal benefit for scientists because your work actually will reach people. The second point is, in the process of making it reachable, you will also probably learn things better. Because a
Absolutely.
lot of times, in the name of jargons, we can hide our ignorance, and this process actually can really uncover all the difficulties in understanding.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
So wonderful. In fact, I'm so glad to also hear and also learn of so many other activities what you do. IISER Kolkata is also a place where a lot of this actually is fostered very well. It's a great environment. I've seen a lot of my own colleagues, of course, a lot of you folks whom I've interacted with, and also the students. The kind of students what you people have been producing over the years has been remarkable. So in that way, the institution ecosystem is equally important. I just want to know, Anita, about what are your kind of futuristic plans, in what direction your own research, including the research on dogs, and especially I'm also interested in knowing your thoughts a little bit on this urban dog and human conflict. This has turned out to be a very big issue. There's a lot of debate. You are an expert. You can't actually get a better expert to comment on this than you. Please give us your thought and also your futuristic perspective.
Yeah, so this is something that I often receive a lot of questions about, dog human conflict.
Mm,
And it's become a kind of a phenomena in every campus in India now.
mm,
So the most number of calls I've received and emails I've received are from IITs actually.
mm, mm,
We have the dog lovers and we have the dog
mm,
haters, and they are fighting among themselves, and the dogs are a nuisance. What do we do? So, somehow over the years, what I've realized is this conflict, if you look at it, it's very, very metropolitan level conflict. If you
mm,
talk to people in the suburbs or even in areas like here, people don't care about dogs barking at night or dogs chasing
mm,
a few cars, and they're like, where will they go? We
mm,
feed them. Otherwise, how will they eat? So
mm,
there has been this coexistence. And I think in the Indian culture, this coexistence has been the norm, right?
mm.
You give
Yeah.
your leftovers to scavengers, and dogs get fed. And if they create too much of a nuisance, you chase them out. But if they give birth to pups in your backyard, you let them be and give them some extra food. That has been the culture in India.
Mm,
While on one side we are talking about Indian knowledge system and Indian culture and Indian heritage and all of this, we are forgetting this very basic culture of being inclusive and coexisting.
mm,
And in the cities, the more I talk to people, it is like, okay, in America you don't get dogs on
mm.
streets. This is not America,
America.
right? In
Yeah.
America, you don't get a lot of other things which you get here, right? So this notion of dogs belong to people's homes is something which is a problem. And this has come from this culture of the West, where dogs are only pets and nothing more, and where you control the life of the dog, right? This has not been the scenario here. And I think our work shows more and more that dogs have their own lives, they are independent animals, and they can survive. In fact, I find it very fascinating that here, when people ask me, often, again, the expert viewpoint is asked, and I say that the dog lovers hate me and the dog haters hate me. Because the dog haters think that, I'm working on dogs and that is why I must be a dog lover, which I am, but of a different kind. And the dog lovers think I don't love the dogs enough because I don't come out in their support. But then I think both of them are interfering with the natural lives of dogs. That is a fact. They don't need your blankets, they don't need your extra rice, they need their independence. And what is fascinating is when I go abroad now to conferences, there I see this idea that, yeah, maybe we should give more freedom to our dogs. Maybe we are ruining their lives. So this very different viewpoint that people come up with after hearing my talk is that, oh my God, what have we done to our pets? Oh my God, they are missing their families. So that is the knee-jerk reaction which often comes out. So it's very interesting that we are trying to imbibe the way they have been living for the past century or so, and now they are looking back and saying, okay, maybe we have things wrong. So there needs to be more about this whole thing. And I also think in urban habitats, there's in some pockets many dogs, probably because we don't let them die their natural death. Because we vaccinate them, we feed them, we give them health care. And then we say, but there are too many dogs. Let us go neuter them because then they'll not give birth. So at every level, we are interfering with their lives. Biologically, a neutered animal is dead, right? Yeah. Because it cannot pass on its genes. As far as biology is concerned, it's a dead animal. But we are keeping it alive because of our pleasure and nothing else. So almost a philosophical question that what right do we have to interfere in the lives of all animals? And that's what we are doing with dogs. My future plans, yes, we always have a chain of experiments lined up and not enough time to do all of them. In fact, just yesterday, I had a very fascinating discussion with Shumita Bhu in IIT Delhi. He works on human cognition, but then now we are planning to start a collaborative project. So we'll see how it goes. So dog humanize and cognition is one field in which we are doing a lot of work. But as always, my core interest has been the social behavior. Now we are looking at meeting dynamics, and we are planning collaborations because now we have a lot of basic behavioral data. So we would now like to look at stress hormone levels. We would like to look at the genetics within the family groups. So that is where we are thinking of now. For a long time, people have asked for collaborations, and I have said, no, I don't have enough of the biology. I don't want to go into, the next level. But now I think we know enough of the natural history. So we are branching out into some collaborative work where I don't have the expertise, but we can get the data. So let's see, that would be kind of the next 10 years plan forward.
Wonderful. I am so glad to hear all these interesting plans and your viewpoints. And
I'm trying to get one of my students to come up with a startup. I'm trying to tell her that she's very interested in welfare, and I'm trying to coax her to get into a startup where she has a shelter where she also can do science and which she thinks is the ideal kind of shelter. So let me see if I can coax her into that mode eventually.
Wonderful. That's actually also a direction which nowadays there's a lot of encouragement within the Indian academic ecosystem, where you would want to take things into the realm of translation. And in your work, the translation is already there, but this would also bring in an entrepreneurial twist to the translation, what you probably would be doing. Anindita, this has been a fantastic, hour of discussion. I am very thankful to you for, sharing all these very fascinating things, what you're doing. And I'm very sure there will be many more things for us to learn in the coming months, future, and also in years. So this is not definitely the only time we'll have you on the Pratidhwani, and I'm very sure we'll have you many more times for this wonderful insight what you've given to us. So thank you very much. Thanks a lot for your thoughts. Yeah.
Pleasure talking to you, Pavan. Thank you.
Yeah. So this is Pratidhwani, where we try to humanize science, this time with the one and the only Anindita Bhadra. Thank you, Anindita.
Thank you.